NPR actually had pretty decent coverage of the Line 5 debate stuff. That was pretty good.
I didn't catch that.
They were talking like they actually had on an advocate for environmental stuff and were just, really holding Gretchen Whitmer to account, basically saying like, yeah, you kind of ran on this. This is a thing that you said you were going to do.
Yeah.
And, what you need to do is shut off the energy so you can bargain from a point of strength, which is, duh. Which I think, like, if there's a difference between, like, liberals and leftists, it's liberals, like, want to come pre-compromised. They're like, here's half the loaf. And then, the Republicans, like, are like, yeah, that's fine, but, like, you're seriously going to end up with, like, 3 crumbs when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
And that's why Bernie is, at this moment, saying we're going to abolish private health care, because I don't think he believes that we're going to abolish private health care in the long run after it goes through the legislative process. But
you've got to start there.
Yeah, you have to start there. I mean, like, I personally would start with, public flogging of the CEOs and then that. But I mean, I understand he's running for president.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, the president we have now joked about shooting someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue, and that didn't.
That's
seem
true.
To,
yeah. Quit being a sissy, Bernie.
Yeah. Just
go for it.
Take it up a notch.
Yeah.
But they're making fun of your accent. They're low key anti-Semites.
Yeah.
Just go get them.
Yeah. I mean, they've already. If you look at the guy from The People Who Insure Me, United Healthcare scumbag. I can't remember what that guy's fucking name is, but he's like, well, we've been trying to keep it low key, but don't worry, we're doing a lot to try to stop this. It's like, yeah, it's because
we didn't actually have any questions about that.
Yeah, like people may have, but they're dumb. So
right.
Just people don't understand how things work in the world might think that. But yeah, we know that don't worry, we know you're trying to kill us all. So
right. We don't have 10 to 15 different Medicare for all proposals on accident.
Yeah, we kind of understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
They, I can't remember who was talking about this. Oh, it was on, they had a pretty decent GOTMFV this week, and the lady was they were talking about Medicare for All. I think it was actually just Chris and LOL GOP were talking about Medicare for All, and, like, LOL GOP brought up a point like, well, all these companies are going to gain in the long run because, if the insurance is being paid by the government, they're going to be paying probably like a small tax, which according to people who I've heard about Medicare for All is 7% on payroll. But, like, that's way less than they pay now if you're giving a person insurance. So it's like, you may as well do that.
Mm-hmm.
But what he doesn't understand, because they don't really think class consciously over there at GOTMFV, is if you have the government providing you health insurance, now you don't have the company lording that over you. You can be like, okay, I don't want to work here. Get out of here. I'm out. See you later. I'll go do my own thing and you can fuck off. And, and the places that have unions will use that to get higher pay. They're like, okay, well, the government pays for my health care, so now I know that you have a lot more money to spend, so...
That's not something that you can complain about anymore.
Yeah, you can't complain about my health care because the government pays for it. You kind of pay for it, but mostly the government pays for it.
Which means that we pay for it now, too.
Yeah, I pay for it in my taxes now, so... You're going to have to pay me like $30 an hour, and they don't want that either. And that's why he's like, I don't understand why all the companies aren't, just pushing this. And that's why, because they understand their own interests, and, LLGOP does not understand class interests.
Yeah. And you could make a point that unions are sort of impotent at this point when it comes to negotiating things like that. if you're not a teacher or in a skilled trade, you probably don't have a strong union who is willing to negotiate in good faith for better benefits for you. I mean, that is kind of changing a little bit after the recent Supreme Court decisions. I think a lot of unions are becoming more militant, which I think is good. But I think you're right in noting that this is going to be a sticking point when it comes to we're actually going to come to the table and negotiate. This was one of the things, and this was very prominent in West Virginia.
Yeah.
Right before the teacher strike, they were talking about linking the health insurance to personal biometrics.
Yeah, just like here you gotta wear this Fitbit or your health premiums are gonna go up.
Right, yeah.
Which is fucking so dystopian.
Yes. But that was the thing that they had control over because they had control over the health insurance. And if they don't have that, then they're left with fewer leverage points to come back after the union and say, well, we won't give you a pay raise, but we'll give you marginally better insurance coverage. Or, we have to cut insurance coverage, but we'll give you a pay raise or something like that.
Well, and the thing is, if you look at any of the packages that come out now, basically they're like, oh, well, here's your contract. And basically you may have gotten a pay raise, but your health care is going to, just eat that all up in the next year just because the price of health care just continues to skyrocket.
Right. You can say, well, if you're concerned about the cost of your health care in the coming year, you can always sign up for a health spending account, which is tax-free. But you have to do all those calculations and sort of guess how much you're going to spend on health care in a year. And then you don't get to spend that money on anything else. So if you need to pay for something that's not health care, you just don't have that money.
Yeah.
How is that a good deal?
It's not.
And that's kind of like the end point to not saying we're going to abolish private health care. Because you give up so much down the line that your major compromise, the big prize bill at the end of the negotiation, is something as milquetoast and counterproductive as tax-free health spending accounts.
Yeah. Just imagine being Amy Klobuchar and wanting to throw binders at people to try to get people tax-saving credit accounts on their health card. Just what drives you to do that? You have nothing. But Sam Cedar from the Majority Report talks about this all the time, and he's like, even just healthcare being a mental tax to you, because you're just he's like, I have to have 12 different spreadsheets on my computer just to, be able to be does my kid get this benefit? Does my kid get that benefit? Do I have to pay for this? Do I have to pay for that? Oh, I have to make sure I send this receipt in for this reimbursement. And this just just not having to think about it. Just I go to the doctor and I get taken care of. And that's all I have to think about. And it's fantastic because, every time you go to the doctor, you're just what am I going to have to do with this in the long run? What hoops do I have to jump through?
Yeah. And the whole in-network, out-of-network, what's the deductible, what's the copay, and this has been talked about to death on NPR and other news agencies, is that nobody knows what they're going to pay for medical services until they actually get them.
Yeah.
How much does it cost to have a chest x-ray?
And it's weird because
it's a fairly common procedure and nobody knows what it costs.
Well, and the thing is, it's completely different in different areas and different hospitals. One place will be oh, that's $200. And another place is oh, it's $1,200.
Yeah.
It's just those are two very different prices if you're, not a rich person.
And then you can sort of sneak around with it too, because I know that the insurance that I have, depending on the procedure, it could be a copay, which is a flat rate that you have to pay to get the service, or it could be a coinsurance, which is a percent that the insurance company will cover of the total cost of the procedure, which, like you said, it could vary based on where you're getting it. So if you're in network, they might cover 90% of the cost. So you're stuck with 10% up to a deductible or an out-of-pocket maximum or something like that. Or if you're out of network, it could be 80 or even 70% that they'll cover, and you have to cover up to 30%. So if that out-of-network place is like, well, this costs $1,000, even if the place in your network is only, $500, you're on the hook for $300.
Yeah.
And you have no idea of how to expect that until it happens.
No, because it's such an incredibly Byzantine system.
Yeah.
Because, it's 1,000 different, health insurance companies all, competing with each other and stuff. And, the thing that frustrates me the most is just people are going to lose their health care. It's people lose their health care all the time.
Where's Brett Baer?
Yeah.
Where's Brett Baer? I need him to hey, everybody who's listening to this, so you two people probably.
Yeah. Three if we're lucky.
Three maybe. Raise your hand if one of your hands are occupied because you're eating on your way to work. I totally get it. You don't have to do this.
Don't die. It's not worth it.
Don't die. But raise your hand if you're willing to give up your private health insurance to go to a Medicare for all system.
Yeah. Everyone.
And if you raised your hand, tweet at Brett Baer, tell him to retire, tell him to give you a job. Oh my gosh, that was such. You saw? I'm assuming that you saw that.
You just see him getting physically mad because he's technically the straight news dude.
Well, this works all the time in my normal program.
It's just he's a straight news dude, so he can't just come across as a propagandist because he's technically Fox News's straight news guy. So he can't be go all Sean Hannity and just get red-faced and scream at Bernie Sanders.
Right. Well, I mean, you say that, and I remember his Benghazi report from a couple of years ago. You can't fool me with that, Brett.
You're not tricking anyone, Brett.
Yeah.
So it is April 19th, one day away from 420.
Blaze it.
Blaze it. I am the Menshevik.
This is Boris the Younger.
We are broadcasting from South Central Michigan, a pockmarked post-industrial hellscape. And today we're going to be talking about two different news outlets. One that is very good and one that is not so good.
That's very polite.
That is a very
good way to say it.
That is a very polite way. That was very diplomatic of me. I mean, what if they heard it and they heard me call them dog shit? They'd be sad.
Hey, Kyle Malin, if you're one of the three people listening to this, have your kids leave the room.
Yeah, it's going to get bad for you, son. I'm real sorry.
He's not listening.
He's not listening. I certainly hope
he
not.
didn't have to pay for it, so
yeah.
It's not interesting.
Yeah.
But do you want to start with the good or the bad?
Let's start with the good.
Yeah. All right.
Let's get everyone warmed up.
I like that attitude.
Talk about something we like before we drag down the attitude of the show.
I will say that these guys are up for a Webby. For best news organization on the web.
You should vote for them on the Webby.
They're in fifth place. They're not going to win.
Who is it? Is it the Young Turks?
No. You want to know who's in first place?
Who's in first place?
The Washington Post. Democracy dies in the darkness, everyone.
Democracy does in fact die in the darkness. Fifth place. That's just, an insult to everyone who works for the Intercept. I'm sorry.
Or is it a blessing? Because if the Washington Post is winning the votes, is that a contest you really want to win?
I don't know. I don't know what all the different categories are for the Webbies, but I know that the Young Turks have won multiple different awards of the Webbies, so that's, that's neither here nor there, but there's definitely an opportunity to rally people, in a grassroots function. So,
right.
I'm curious.
Maybe Jeff Bezos is making all of his warehouse workers spend their breaks voting
for the
for the Webbies.
It's like, here, well, while you're pissing into that bottle, what you can do is, just vote here. Yeah, follow the link. Yeah, no. Yeah,
we'll provide you
with
with a
pissing
tablet.
on your hand. Focus.
If you, we'll provide you with a tablet, but I swear to God, if you get any piss on this tablet, you're fired, and we're gonna claw back your last 2 weeks
To pay for the tablet.
Right? Yeah, you're stuck with a tablet. You're stuck with a piss tablet.
Yeah.
Have fun getting a job of that, sucker.
Yeah. So
that got dark.
It did get dark. So the outlet that we're going to talk about is the Intercept, as alluded to earlier. The Intercept is one of my go-to places to get news, especially as we start getting into the, as insane as it seems, the 2020 primaries. Both Steny Hoyer and Nancy Pelosi, through the Intercept reporting, they've kind of unearthed people who are going to be running against them. And, that does a lot for getting those people just a shitload of money. And obviously, you're not going to outraise Nancy Pelosi or Steny Hoyer. But as it turns out, just based on AOC, you don't actually have to. You just have to have enough to just pay like fucking 6 million people to go canvass doors, until which point you just throw them out. So,
yeah, the Intercept is a really good news organization to go to for, not just analysis, but coverage from a point of view that you will often not see in the mainstream media. And this sometimes results in a perspective on an issue that's being covered a lot, as was the case during the Mueller investigation, or was something that really isn't being covered very much, either at the time, or maybe it was covered a lot earlier, but now there are new revelations. I feel like that's happening a lot with the Venezuela crisis that's going on.
They keep coming up with new stuff.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, wow, well, they tried to send a plane full of guns to Venezuela from Miami. Isn't that interesting? Or the fascists and popular will actually set that humanitarian convoy on fire and not the government. That sort of makes you ask some questions, and you're like, well, nobody else is covering this.
Yeah.
Or if they are covering it, then they're burying it.
Yeah, the only other kind of news outlet I think that is on a similar beat but is slightly different is Democracy Now!, which I love as a source, but just trying to listen to it for even 2 days in a row just brings you to the point of suicide, because it is incredibly depressing shit. Yeah,
it's sort of like the pipeline protest from North Dakota. Remember Facebook when that was going on? Just sad, dark shit for every day, videos and pictures and it's that all the time. Yeah, Amy Goodman just covering dogs with her mouth, with Native American blood on them. You're just like, I hate this world. Please make it stop. Yeah, but in contrast to what we get with generally every other news organization, if you saw what they're covering, it would compel people and move them. With the same frequency that you've seen coverage of just the most inane, banal bullshit. Yeah. I don't want to bring up Mueller twice in the same thought, but I'm going to do it because... Yeah, just imagine if, anything that was, important, to working people was covered as much as that fucking story. Yeah. How about if a union was striking and it got more than 1 or 2 days of coverage on NPR, just asking questions, well, why are they striking? Why is this happening? Yeah. And not covering the end of the strike, not covering the details or any of the other strikes, or, if they were covering different changes, I'm jumping all over the place here, but I'm trying to think of something specific. And I think one of the most prominent ones was do you remember that we're in a trade war with China? Yeah. Okay. Do you remember that the Department of Agriculture set aside $12 billion in subsidies for farmers who are expected to have losses as a result of this trade war? Yeah. Did you know that we're tapped out? I did not know that. That's interesting.
I have an interesting, this is completely unrelated to the Intercept, but did you know that the reason right now, if you are a person who shops at McDonald's, or eats at McDonald's, I should say, you're like, wow, there's a lot of bacon options going on right now. That's interesting, and it's all really cheap. And the reason that is because we're in a trade war with China, and so all of our pork, all of our pork that used to be distributed to China is now just sitting out there. And actually, the United States government kind of works to force companies to take that. They're like, so you should really do a lot of bacon shit, huh?
Yeah, they subsidized hogs in particular. I remember seeing that their rate was a lot higher than generally every other agricultural good that they were buying back. Because that was another part of the program, is that the government was going to buy all of this surplus stock that was just going to be sitting in warehouses because it was going to go to China, and now it's not.
Yeah.
And hogs, the rate for hogs,
grain you can store for a long time. Hogs, you can only store it for so long.
Well, the grain that we would be storing was all corn.
Yeah.
And that doesn't last as long as you might think, especially if your warehouse gets flooded by a bomb cyclone.
Yeah.
And then you're just kind of stuck.
Yeah, and all the stuff mentioned earlier, I would not have known without Intercept reporting, honestly.
Yeah.
I tend to absorb my Intercept pieces through voice-to-speech app. Text-to-speech app most of the time. And, yeah, that really helps me put down a lot of Intercept articles. And when I have the luxury of listening to someone from their daily, just spoken edition read pieces to me, I love that, too. I occasionally will put one down reading, but, with kids, it's not easy.
Yeah, my favorite things about the Intercept are probably the podcasts, because, and I'll warn you about this, because the Intercepted podcast with Jeremy Scahill can be long.
It is quite long.
It's about an hour and a half, usually, and that leaves a lot of breathing space for the really good interviewing that Jeremy tends to do.
Yeah.
I remember specifically the episode that came out right after the Jamal Khashoggi.
Yeah, that was a good episode.
Because that got covered to death.
Yes, it did.
But the podcast that Scahill put out the week after that happened provided a lot of context that was not available in the reporting that had been done elsewhere. And of course, Deconstructed with Mehdi Hasan.
Absolutely priceless.
Really good stuff, too.
It's also a shorter podcast, too.
Yeah.
It's only about a half an hour long.
But it's also a very good news source if you want to cite someone that will cause someone to call you a Russian bot. This is the place to go.
Yeah. There's a certain part of the center that has an absolutely broken brain with anything regarding Glenn Greenwald, Jeremy Scahill.
Even Naomi Klein.
Yeah.
Which is the worst.
Yeah, she's a saint. Fuck you.
Yeah. If you haven't read Noah's Not Enough, it's really good. I can't recommend Disaster Capitalism because I haven't read it yet. Sorry, Naomi. If you're one of the 3 people listening to this.
Me neither. I have also read Noah's Not Enough, and I do need to get to Disaster Capitalism, but what are you going to do?
Right. If you could have Jeremy Scahill read it for us and release it in a podcast, then I would read it.
I think she actually, in the Noah's Not Enough, I feel fairly confident that she did the own voiceover for it.
Oh, really?
I'm pretty sure.
I should check with the library then. Well, no, they don't have the book, I don't think.
No.
Bother your local library and tell them to get all of Naomi Klein's books.
Also, just bother your local library and tell them to carry leftist magazines.
Yes.
God.
Tell them to get The Nation.
The Nation is in most places. That's the furthest left thing I've ever seen, though.
Okay. Yeah, get Current Affairs.
Current Affairs, Jacobin, Commune, just
the whole thing.
I want some boomer just to see their kid pick up a brightly covered magazine and they read what's in it and just, fill their diaper. That's what I need.
Yep. They're like, oh, they're learning about Cuba's healthcare system. How am I going to deprogram? How do you prepare your kids to learn about Cuba? It's the new gay people.
Yeah, it truly is. How do I talk to my kid about the fact that we have a lower infant mortality or a higher infant mortality rate than Cuba? How do I talk to my kids about that? How do I tell them that they have a higher literacy rate than us?
Oh God, I forgot about that.
Yeah, how do I tell them that? That's embarrassing.
It really is. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm embarrassed that we have a system that makes that okay.
Yeah, it's kind of shameful, honestly.
Yeah, well,
but
so read and listen to The Intercept in all of its forms.
Absolutely.
You'll be better for it.
Yeah, you'll be so much more well-informed, especially going into the primaries here. Ryan Grimm, David Dayen, and that whole group that covers the primaries from a progressive angle does just such a fantastic job at it.
Mm-hmm.
And, with the things that the DNC is doing with blackballing contractors who work in primaries against incumbents,
yeah,
it's going to be 100% necessary to really juice the Intercept's numbers, because I'm sure they're going to be coming out with, like a new rotten thing every single day.
Yeah, there was it made me think of Nate Silver's polling prognostications and just absolutely no data required for the stuff that he's saying about candidates.
His like, is it hexagrams or pentagrams of
pentacles? I think is what they call it. No, that's a joke.
But just absolutely astrology for people who think they're wonks. No offense to astrology. Absolutely more credible than Nate Silver's fucking pentagrams that he's making.
You know who is polling well among black people is Kamala Harris. I'm like, well, why do you say that? He doesn't give in it. Like, he says, oh, well, actually, Bernie Sanders does poll a lot better among African Americans than Kamala Harris does.
But this is just a gut feeling that I have. Like, I don't like.
Tell me more about this gut feeling.
Both him and Harry Enton, are completely moving into pundit zone.
Mm-hmm.
And, they used to rail against that and stuff like that. And it's disappointing because, I don't know how anyone can take him seriously after 2016. Just what was he at? 98% chance that Hillary Clinton was going to win or something like that.
Thankfully, it's baseball season, so he'll have something else to write about.
Yeah.
Nate Silver, if you're one of the three people in the carpool with Kyle Milan and Naomi Klein, I'm not sorry.
Do better.
Do better. You've had so much statistics training. You know better. Just do it.
Well, first what you do is you drink some tea. then you pour out your cup and you look at the tea leaves, and then you put those into an Excel sheet. You put all those answers into an Excel sheet, and then you look at the graph, and then here you go. This is what I've got. It's basically the same thing. More reliable, actually.
If error, value, comma, Hillary Clinton.
So, moving on from a incredible news source to one that is not incredible.
To one that sucks.
It truly sucks.
Sorry, Kyle. Not sorry, really.
No,
anyway,
we're not.
Sorry to your children.
No, because, in a separate, this is completely aside. No one would know this because they're not demented and listen to the MIRS podcast. But in a separate podcast, he talks about the time when, I forget what was going on in the Capitol, but basically there was something big happening, and his wife was pregnant, and he just did not end up doing the baby room at all and pushed it onto one of his friends. So, yeah, not a good excuse, man. Just sleep less. That's all you have to do. I mean, even if you're getting 4 hours of sleep, you just got to get that baby thing painted, man. It's not good. It's not.
I wish I had a joke for that.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything to say.
I understand. Because there's nothing funny about child neglect. Or wife neglect, I guess, in this particular moment. But anyway, I digress. So we're going to be covering a website and podcast that, you'll be able to listen to the podcast because it's free. They put it out for free for you to hear in case you hate yourself, and like me. And they also, if you happen to have, a spare, 200 some odd dollars a month, you can pay for their news service, which is, a good news service. It provides you up-to-the-date information about what's going on in committees and just on the floor, the goings-on in the Capitol in general. They report on the governor's office, the executive branch, all kinds of different stuff. Very, very informative, but only if you are rich enough to afford it, which is basically just lobbyists.
Yep. And it's great that you ended up with that because I think we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it because they kind of don't hide the ball on that one.
Yeah. So this clip,
we're going to talk. They have a guest. The inimitable Ron Fournier of the AP and of hotsoup.com, and
love it.
Also is now a PR consultant for basically Consumers Energy.
Yep.
So we're going to listen to this and then come back with some commentary.
Maybe.
Tell you, as someone who has covered presidents since '96, I'll tell you, Mayor Pete is the one to watch.
Is that right? You're just not saying that because he announced yesterday.
No, I've been saying that for 6 months now. I've known Mayor Pete since 2005 when he was still, or just got out of Harvard University. I was doing a fellowship up there, and I was on the board of the Harvard Institute of Politics, and we were giving Pete Buttigieg an award. And he gave the speech, and I'm sitting at a table with a fellow board member named David Axelrod.
Oh, I think I've heard of him.
You might have heard of him. And we both looked at each other and said, this is like Obama. I mean,
well, which one that you need to pay attention to was the one that impressed me and my friend a couple of years ago.
Because he's like us, because we all went to the same fancy club together, and he's so smart.
He's a lot like this other really impressive guy that we both liked as well.
Yeah, and he's impressive in the same way that he really knows how to talk in a way that makes you think that he agrees with you, but actually just doesn't mean anything at all.
He sort of hates your guts, actually, but he makes you hope that he doesn't.
Yeah.
And that is what it takes.
Yeah. And my favorite part about I didn't include this in any of the clips, but they just gush about how he is just like a normal, relatable guy. It's just he doesn't come off as a normal, relatable guy. He comes off as an exceptionally polished guy.
He speaks 7 languages.
Yeah, I relate to him because I also was a McKinsey consultant, and I also speak 7 languaves, and I also,
did a tour in Afghanistan.
Just did a tour in Afghanistan, and I'm just completely and totally relatable, just like everyone does it,
Right. I was also the gay mayor of one of the most Catholic cities in America.
Yeah, it's just things that everyone accomplishes.
Right. Yeah. You see that guy in the street and you're like, wow, he is so approachable. I could just walk up and shake his hand and buy him a McGriddle and
he's
sit down.
Yeah, he's going to completely eat it, and then we can just chat in Norwegian.
Yeah. Right. It's I can that. They hit it on the head by comparing him to Obama, because that's what a lot of people thought about Obama.
Yeah.
One of the first things that Obama did was the beer summit.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be like this big, if we had a disagreement, we could just sit down and have a beer together, it'll be fine.
Yeah, we'll solve it. And then, also he just never learned until the 7th year of his presidency that Republicans were never going to fucking work with him ever.
Right. The Republicans don't want to shake his hand because, one, he's black.
Yeah, that's the number one reason. And then they also have to pretend that they're, like super ideologically different than him.
Right. Yeah. So,
like, literally, they're just so absolutely psychotic that they saved us from having our fucking Social Security cut. By Barack Obama. Like, thank you, Tea Party, for being fucking insane, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. But that's exactly it. They're talking about how good he is at fooling people into thinking that he's one of them, when he is so clearly not. No.
A thing that I learned about Pete Buttigieg is that apparently, he listens to a police scanner, which is fucking a weird Batman-like thing to do. That's not healthy.
Has anyone seen Pete and Batman in the same room?
I don't think so.
He could be Batman.
But he apparently was in his office as mayor listening to a police scanner and heard at the hospital that, we need an Arabic translator right now. And so he apparently stopped what he was doing and went to the hospital and translated Arabic, which is a nice thing to do. But, there's a lot of questions to be asked there. Why are you listening to a police scanner in your office? That's a weird thing to do.
Are you bored?
Yeah, just there's so much
stuff. The mayor of South Bend is bored?
Doesn't have anything to do?
That doesn't sound like a thing. That does not sound like a thing. The mayor of Jackson is not bored. The mayor of Lansing is not bored. The mayor of Ann Arbor is definitely not bored.
Yeah.
Why would the mayor of South Bend ever be that bored that he's listening to the police?
Well, maybe if we had the intellect of him, you could get bored with mayoral stuff. You're so goddamn smart that you just have it figured out. First, you demolish all the black people's houses.
Yep.
And the Hispanic people's houses.
Well, he didn't do that. The market did that.
Oh,
it's just what needs to happen.
Yeah, sorry. That's what needs to happen. The market needs to happen. And, it's funny because, the MIRS people, and especially Ron here, is just, he's saying that this guy has it. He completely has it. And it's just the only thing he has is fucking Ivy League polish, which all you fucking liberal dipshits worship.
Yeah.
You guys are obsessed with credentials, and he has all the credentials.
And again, how does that make him like us? How does that make him approachable?
No, it's...
How can you say that in the same thought?
No, a person who's approachable is even just... there's so many more approachable politicians than Pete Buttigieg. Whatever you think about Biden, Biden is an approachable person.
Well, if you're a dude.
Yeah, if you're a dude, yeah. He'll still
let's not go nuts with that.
He'll still probably touch you, but he won't sniff your hair or anything.
Yeah, he won't,
So, with that genius analysis that he kind of lays down there, you're not going to be surprised by the next thing he brings up here. He basically just does a... this president is the opposite of this president kind of analysis, and you're going to hear it in a second, and we'll just talk about it afterwards.
You think about what America with presidents. You go back in modern times, every president who succeeds an incumbent is like the mere opposite of the previous. Carter was the anti-Nixon. Reagan was the anti-Carter. Clinton was the anti-Bush/Reagan. George W. Bush was the anti-Bill Clinton. Remember putting his hand up and I'll bring integrity back to the White House? Barack Obama was the anti-Bush. Donald Trump is the anti-Obama.
Okay, and we're back.
I think that this particular line of reasoning bears special calling out, because I see this a lot on the right side of the aisle, where you have these sweeping judgments of history based on shallow, surface-level analysis. He starts off with, well, every president is the opposite of the one before in the modern era. He clarifies that. Can't go back that far because then it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But it, doesn't make any sense now. But follow this. he says that Carter was the opposite of Nixon.
Yeah.
Not the opposite of Ford.
Yep.
Because Ford apparently doesn't count.
No.
How dare you? The only Michigan president.
Yeah.
Actually, Ford kind of sucked, but
Yeah, he was awful. But, that's Michigan erasure.
So, yeah. So Reagan was the opposite of Carter. And you get to this point where we're cycling through like, okay, yeah, that kind of, sure, we'll give you that. That makes sense. But as soon as you start asking questions about what that actually means, it sort of falls apart a little bit. Like, why is Reagan the anti-Carter? Like, they both hate unions.
Yeah.
They're both old and white. They both,
both the first two neoliberal presidents.
Yeah. And like, yeah, Carter wasn't as much of a bloodthirsty imperialist as Reagan was, but that doesn't make Reagan the opposite.
Yeah. And when everyone talks about Jimmy Carter and how he's such a great guy and he's like going and abolishing diseases and building houses, that is what you should have to do after you've been an American president. Like
to make up for it.
Yeah, like, and that doesn't even come close. But like, at least he's trying to do something except for, I don't know what, surfing with fucking Richard Branson or whatever.
Right. That or grabbing women's asses as HW was apparently doing up until his dying day.
Well, he earned it because he was the president, I guess,
And so here's the point where we get to like Obama being the opposite of Bush.
Yeah.
Where there were so many things, like, yeah, you could point to the stuff that Obama did that was different from what Bush was doing. Like, we drew down in Iraq. We drew down in Afghanistan. We had more humanitarian economic policies. Like, we had an actual stimulus instead of a tax cut. And it's easy to think that this is somehow the opposite of what Bush was. And it's not. He's not the anti-Bush. He's just, we were tired of Bush and we picked something different. We thought that maybe McCain would be more of the same, and he probably was, but that's not saying that Obama wasn't also more of the same.
Yeah, I mean, what Obama was a more polite, more polished version of American imperialism. And he did a lot of disservices to, like the anti-war people who thought, oh, well, this is going to be a good guy because he was anti-Iraq war. Because basically what he did is took everything that Bush did and just codified it legally. So now that there's like a very fucking strong legal framework around all of our, bloodthirsty, just bloodletting with drones.
And if they weren't doing what Bush was doing, which was outright invasion and occupation, then they were doing things that were off the books or
secret,
questionably legal, like drone bombings, or still supporting coups like in Honduras in 2009, where Clinton and Obama basically organized a coup of the Honduran government. And no surprise that has led to political instability and a refugee situation in the country. But if you bring that up, then you're like, well, that's
you're just doing whataboutism,
right?
And the thing is,
and
like,
you could just bring up Libya,
and just on top of that, like, it was his State Department and Hillary Clinton who just gave all that money to Lava Jato in Brazil. Like, say what you want about Bush, obviously a horrible, horrible guy, but just didn't have the attention to repress South America when you're just gallivanting all over the Middle East, and Obama took some of that attention and started to try to turn back the pink tide. Right.
Then when you look at the people who tried to draw attention to the stuff that we were doing that made Obama look a little bit like Bush, at least from the public side, like Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden.
Yeah.
What happened to them?
Yeah, absolute pariahs.
Yeah. Chelsea Manning just got out of solitary. I mean, and we're talking about it now from the Trump administration, which I would argue is probably the anti-Obama.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely an anti-Obama, even in his own perception of it.
Yeah.
But, definitely, I mean, like, there's no comparing Obama and Trump, because definitely everything that Obama was doing bad, Trump, just took that and cranked that up, to 11.
Right. And then anything good that he did manage to do is just, it was all executive orders anyway. So that's pretty much gone. And then you get to like Pete Buttigieg, argued as the anti-Trump.
Yeah.
Are you joking?
Yeah. I mean, like, it's ridiculous. And just in the fact that, like, Pete Buttigieg has said some incredibly shitty stuff about Chelsea Manning.
Yes, absolutely.
Just like, just horrible things. And it's just like, this, Pete Buttigieg is not your woke bae. I'm sorry. It's not a thing.
He's not. And that's the thing. It's like you get to the end of the line and all of these presidents are the person who came before, only if you look at it from a certain angle.
A surface personality-based thing.
So Buttigieg...
It's like Hegelian.
Yes, but stupid.
Spirits, yeah. Like, it's literally like, they're literally like, just like talking about like the general spirit of this president and the spirit of that president. And, it's like Hegel for dummies.
So Buttigieg is the anti-Trump if the only thing that matters about Trump is that he's old and stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
And he is those things.
Yeah, he is the opposite.
Those are not the most important things about him.
Yeah. So, in this next clip here, Ron and the MIRS boys kind of talk about the structure of news media. They get very confused about, what the difference between yellow journalism and muckraker is, and, they are confused about subscribers-based services and what advertising does to this whole model. It's weird to listen to, but we're going to play this clip here. It's a lot to listen to. Use that 2 times functionality if you've got it. It's tough. I apologize, but the whole clip I thought to be worthwhile to hear, and then we'll comment when we get back.
Business model has collapsed. A business model came out of the last time that we had huge economic change, huge demographic change, and huge technological change. The first few years of the 20th century. Out of that era came the muckrakers, and the muckrakers begot the business model where you could put an ad against a magazine or newspaper that had huge subscription, and that more than paid for what it cost to collect news. Mm-hmm. Because of that business model, the American public is not used to paying what it costs to produce news. You guys know this. You have one of the rare business models that's working, but most readers aren't as sophisticated as yours and don't want to pay what it costs or aren't used to paying what it costs to gather the news. So that business model is collapsing. Reporters are being laid off. The quality of the product is declining as reporters and editors get laid off. So we're creating this very invirtuous circle where people are walking away from news organizations. And the business model that seems to be succeeding, in addition to subscribers like you guys do, but the general interest news organization model that seems to be succeeding is the partisan one.
Like the Huffington Post, for example?
And I'll even go to my beloved New York Times. Look at all their subscription gains the last 3 years. It's all people left of center. You tell me that's not going to affect how they cover the news. So every MSNBC, Wall Street Journal, every news organization now, general interest news organization, is being forced to take a side. Because we, the people, don't want, most of us, unfortunately, don't want to read news that disconfirms our biases. We want to walk around in our intellectual bubbles. So we are incentivizing news organizations to be one-sided.
It's a good point, though, John, because it's so much different than the regular newspapers or the TV stations where you have people who are walking around in that intellectual bubble, whereas the people who read us basically want to know the facts. What happened to committee? Yeah. What was the announcement?
We're basically closer to a trade publication for lobbyists and government affairs professionals and elected officials that really need to know the ins and the nuts and bolts. So it's a little different than we don't have to appeal to a broad audience like the AP or the Detroit News or Free Press. So
it is a little different, and I don't know how you get that. I mean, I know there's people out there who want to know just the facts.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, first and foremost, the difference between yellow journalism and muckraking are two different things. They're very different things. Like, muckraking is a good thing. And, basically trying to dig up shit, which, I mean, basically, if the Intercept existed back in the day, they would be called muckrakers.
Yes, that's absolutely accurate.
And yellow journalism is completely different. That is just, having hyperbolic headlines, usually, just being straight out war propaganda and, selling for incredibly cheap, but giving you a ton of content because it's all propaganda. And with ads mixed in. I mean, he's kind of similar in the ad sense. Like, I mean, muckraking journalists sold ads, but so did yellow journalism. So, I mean, I don't know. He's really confused here.
It doesn't seem to line up with what he is actually talking about, because he's talking about advertising-driven newspaper journalism. But that's a good thing in the sense that paid, like, I'm trying to really distinguish what he is trying to say is good about this system.
It's not clear. He's mostly just lamenting the fact that, things have changed. He's sad that, he's not the only person who gets to control the news anymore. He somehow claims that there's 300 million different news editors earlier in the piece, which I didn't play for you, but just, there's not 300 million people do not control the news. That's absolutely idiotic. 3 million people, boomers posting on their Facebook page about whatever the fuck they're posting, they're not affecting the news in any meaningful way. Like, that's not true. Like, there's still people who have control over the news. It's just, not you and 14 of your friends. It's just, a more, spread out net of something that's kind of similar, but, obviously social media puts a little bit of a hiccup in that.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. He's just mad that it doesn't work the way he wants it to.
Yeah. He wants to be able to have it's honestly a little bit authoritarian, in the sense that, Chomsky definitely talks about there being a propaganda model. In the whole area that he was analyzing was the time that, Ron is looking so, longingly back to, like when him and 12 of his buddies get to control the whole narrative. And, thankfully we're not in that era anymore.
Yeah, because then, I don't know, because you can argue that the news doesn't have that influence anymore, and you're right, it doesn't. But you want to talk about these folks who are just posting memes on Facebook and claiming that they're the editors of the news now. Like, no, they're obviously being influenced by the news, by the same organizations and organs that had the same influence before. It just looks different.
Yeah, and even if it's not necessarily a cable news thing, there's a million, completely spread out right-wing news outlets that, look like some kind of grassroots bullshit that, they're paying to spread information. Just the same way they would have been, if all the money was going into one big company.
Right. So, yeah, they're not all subscribing to the Boston Globe anymore, but it's still the same thinking. It's still the same news. And, that's not... Just because you can't figure it out and it doesn't work the way you want it to doesn't make it some sort of self-identifying PC snowflake bullshit. That's not...
Yeah, they kind of go... Like, he starts lamenting about, the subscriber model, even my New York Times has, just gotten this big, huge bump because, they're covering stuff more ideologically. And, if you're a person who's truly on the left, you don't see that because obviously the New York Times is your enemy and they have never stopped being your enemy and they'll continue to be your enemy because, of the class interests that make that newspaper continue to work.
the articles that are not op-eds or opinion pages, they look almost identical to the stuff that you see in the Post, to the stuff you see in the LA, well, not the LA Times, they're a little bit better.
Slightly better, yeah.
The San Francisco Chronicle, to the Chicago Tribune, to the Detroit Free Press.
They're all the same.
They all the same. They cover the same things. They use the same language. The only difference is the stuff that you see in the opinion and the op-ed piece, which is really
a dumpster fire.
Yeah, and it also ends up being the only reason that people are subscribing to these organizations in the first place, because they want that op-ed take. They want to be told what to think by the Washington Post. They don't want democracy to die.
Yeah, they're just like, they're wringing their hands. They're like, if I don't pay the New York Times, then who's going to, do all the investigative journalism? But I'm sorry, it would happen if the New York Times didn't exist. The Intercept would have a larger market share.
Instead of fixing their coverage, instead of actually doing what they claim to be doing, they're instead shaming people into propping up their sick and twisted business model.
Yeah.
And that I don't know how you can't just see that happening and see that as the problem, and instead saying, isn't it a shame that we can't shame more people into doing this?
Yeah. And the whole thing that they really get up their own asses here, just getting high on their own supply is, MIRS is, their readers are savvy and smart because they want just the facts, sir.
Yeah.
And, realistically, no, their readers are basically either PR ghouls that they'll eventually feature on this fucking podcast.
Yep.
Or they're some kind of, just government, affairs ghoul who will also be featured on this podcast eventually. Or they're a lobbyist. And those are the people who have enough money to pay $200 a month. And they're not doing it because they care about facts. They're doing it because they want to corrupt the system.
Yeah. They want to be able to say at the dinner table at Thanksgiving, well, the devil's in the details, and they just drop that bomb and let it sit. I was like, I'm going to let people ask me what that was about, and then I'll tell them what to think.
Yeah.
Because I got the inside scoop.
Well, and just, then they get to pretend that government is, more complicated than it actually is. Because, if you know all what's going on in every single committee, and the inner workings of the, the government's, the governor's administration, you get to feel so smart. But realistically, it all just boils down to, if you get enough people on your side, you get what you want.
Isn't it weird that the only people that they tend to have on this podcast are lobbyists and government ghouls?
Yeah, or occasionally a person from government.
Yeah, and then, because that happens, the exact same thing happens later on in this interview, is that they talk about energy policy.
Yeah,
with
a
he
guy who
just...
Yeah, he just completely, it's just like, well, I'm not, supporting the status quo. I'm defending,
people's jobs and the stability of the energy grid.
Yeah, it's like, no, you're not. You're just an awful ghoul who works for Consumers Energy.
But they still spin it like, oh, the people who criticize this, they just don't understand how it works.
Yeah. And it's like, well, the reason they don't understand how it works is because you don't aim to provide them that information. You literally, in your fucking Twitter bio, Kyle Malin, have, I don't tweet things that I'm not paid for.
Oh, it's a weird way to say it, but yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. You don't.
Yeah, you could spend your free time when you're on Twitter, trying to inform people, but you don't.
Because there's no point.
Yeah,
that's not what you're paid to do.
You got to get that lobbyist cash instead.
Right. So we'll just spin it. We'll say, look, the reason that we need Line 5 is because stability and good things. And if you think it's not a good thing, then you're just a dummy. You're just a idealistic wacko. Right. How about you just go subscribe to news that makes you feel good, so you don't have to think about reality. I mean, checkmate atheists. I mean, to be fair to the MIRS podcast, you said that they only bring on, lobbyists and
politicians and PR people, but I mean, after this literal segment, they do bring on some crypto fascists from the original Tea Party. They do give them a solid, 25-minute long interview to air all their basically slightly veiled racism.
Yeah.
Like, literally, it's the equivalent of, these people are so fucking psychotically far right that you're just like, what is the equivalent, MIRS? Like, why haven't you brought on the local anarchist chapter? Like you need to bring on the local anarchist chapter to be balanced and fair.
Yeah, bring on some wobblies, Kyle.
Yeah, why aren't you talking to the IWW? Seriously.
That's debate us. Bring on the wobblies, Kyle.
Bring on the two guys from the Robin. They'll talk to you.
Yeah. Debate us, coward. No. But that's kind of how it feels.
But it's seriously, and the thing is, Kyle literally constantly, he considers himself a very even-minded person, but he will say the words loony left. Just talking about, a person who's, in the mainstream of progressivism.
But he'll give OG Tea Partiers half his program.
Yeah.
He would never do that. If Lansing DSA ever deigned to be on his program in the first place, he wouldn't give them 15 minutes.
No, he would be adversarial the entire time.
Which, I mean, that's something that we're used to at this point. But
yeah, but you wouldn't be just letting a bunch of crypto fascists talk for 15 minutes.
Tell us what you thought about that poster that made Obama look like a witch doctor.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I didn't come up with the poster myself, but I didn't think it was in bad taste. I probably would have done it differently, but... And I'm making him sound like a dickhead, which he
the guy's voice, you guys can... I'll put the link to the whole podcast in the show notes, but there is a fucking 100% chance that guy had a mustache. A big mustache. It's inconceivable that he didn't. He was he literally had just that Walter Brimley voice going on. Just That's really all you need to know about MIRS, folks, and I think that's where we're going to end it today. So you guys enjoy yourselves and pester a local news organization.
Yep, go bother your local news.
And if you like what you heard on this show, there's many ways you can help. You can follow me, the Menchievic.
Or me, Boris the Younger.
You can also head over to our Patreon, patreon.com/FlackRacketRadio. You can follow us on Twitter at FlackRacketRadio. You can leave a review on iTunes. That's very important. If you leave a nice 5-star review and actually make a comment that really puts us in touch with a lot more people, really. Especially in the first few weeks of a podcast launch, that is 100% essential.
Yeah, even if you're not on iTunes, I use Podcast Republic, and you can leave reviews on that too. So just
wherever,
help us out.
Wherever you're listening to, that helps the algorithm.
Yes,
and like and subscribe.
Yeah, and we're figuring out what our Patreon rewards would be. So if you have any suggestions on that, hit us up on Twitter, or the DMs are open. The DMs are, in fact, open. Slide right in there, comrades, and help us figure this out. One of them definitely will be a Discord server. Kind of connect the community. That is helpful. So if you can send us any money at all, please. We're very poor. We live in Russia. Yeah. We're not being paid very much to influence American elections. So any money at all that you can send us, whether it's in U.S. dollars or rubles, just either one's great. We'll take whatever. If you just are sending bags for of potatoes. Each according to his. So any money at all, we very greatly appreciate it.